Breaking news from Eastern Europe suggests a possible turning point. Belarus has issued what many interpret as a warning toward Russia, and recent decisions may indicate a subtle but meaningful shift in favor of Ukraine. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Future X USA channel. Please subscribe and like my video. Belarus, long considered Russia's closest ally in the region, is showing signs of recalibration. Changes in border policy, diplomatic tone, and domestic safety measures hint at a desire to assert greater independence without provoking open conflict. A summary of what is unfolding. Belarus is tightening control over transit routes previously used by Russian forces, refining its customs procedures, engaging more diplomatically with Western neighbors, and quietly exploring internal strategies for energy diversification and economic resilience. What it is Fricka desires. These steps may not yet amount to full alignment with Ukraine, but together they represent a web of decisions that point toward a future where Minsk seeks to protect its sovereignty, reduce dependence, and escape being pulled directly into Moscow's strategic orbit. Outwardly, Belarus maintains many signs of allegiance with Russia. Joint military drills, public messaging reaffirming cooperation, and treaty obligations remain in place. Yet on closer inspection, external behavior has begun to diverge from the familiar pattern. Russian military convoys crossing Belarusian territory are being subjected to longer, more rigorous inspections. Some key border crossings have changed operating procedures, and movement of heavy weaponry appears more constrained than before. Satellite imagery shows that while training exercises continue, the areas used by Russian forces are being scaled back after the most visible phases. Freight logs and trade statistics hint at reduction in transit of materials that could be used in offensive operations. Diplomatic messages from Minsk refer more often to national interest, sovereignty, and non-alignment, rather than unqualified solidarity with Russia. These external indicators suggest Belarus is laying foundation for greater autonomy in its foreign policy, even as it navigates deep obligations and pressures from Moscow. Within Belarus, debates behind closed doors are intense. Some officials stress the risks of unchecked alignment with Russian strategic demands, economic vulnerability, exposure to sanctions, international isolation, and domestic legitimacy erosion. Others warn that distancing too far or too fast could trigger Russian countermeasures. Loss of energy discounts or subsidies, block trade, economic strangulation, or even military pressure. Experts believe Belarus is quietly building contingency plans, alternative trade corridors, seeking energy import diversification, stockpiling critical supplies, reinforcing domestic infrastructure, and strengthening internal security and civil defense systems. Conversations suggest a recognition that alignment with Ukraine or the West cannot happen overnight, and that incremental moves, symbolic gestures, administrative changes, logistical modifications may offer both breathing room and leverage. Internal assessments are reportedly weighing cost versus risk daily, calibrating how far to go without triggering an irreversible backlash. Effectiveness of changes will hinge on performance. How policies translate into practice will determine whether the recalibration gains traction. Border inspections must be consistent, transparent, and applied broadly. Selective restrictions may be interpreted by Moscow as betrayal, and inconsistent enforcement could weaken Belarus's negotiating position. Trade and energy ministries must work hand in glove with defense and foreign affairs agencies to ensure that decisions meant to safeguard sovereignty do not undermine economic stability. If Belarus succeeds in slowing or halting certain Russian military transit, the impact on Russian logistics could be non-trivial. At the same time, civilian life inside Belarus must not suffer unduly. Shortages of energy or goods, sharp inflation, or power disruptions could provoke domestic unrest. Balancing economic continuity while trimming elements of strategic dependence will test administrative capacity and political resolve. Safety measures are receiving renewed emphasis. Belarusian authorities are reportedly upgrading surveillance along major transport arteries and border zones, enhancing radar and monitoring systems, stepping up drone detection capability, and increasing the visibility of checkpoints. Civil defense planning is being revisited. Shelters, emergency communication networks, medical stockpiles, and protocols for civilian protection are being assessed and improved. Steps are being taken to secure supply chains for fuel, food, medicine in case of disruptions. Domestic security forces are also being briefed on scenarios involving escalation or spillover, including managing protests or cross-border incidents. The objective seems twofold: protect the population from external military risk, and maintain public confidence in government capacity to shield citizens from the fallout of geopolitical tension. What gives Belarus a potentially strong position is its geography, its role as a crossroads, and the leverage embedded in being seen by all sides as both a partner and a potential pivot point. Belarus lies between Russia and Ukraine, sits near EU borders, and controls transport routes that are essential for trade, military logistics, and energy transit. That territorial position enables it to negotiate from a place of relative power. Russia needs routes through Belarus. Ukraine, Western institutions, and neighboring states are interested in transit reliability, energy stability, and diplomatic predictability. If Belarus signals even limited support for Ukraine, permitting humanitarian corridors, restricting movement of offensive equipment, or adopting policies that favor neutrality, Western cost-benefit calculations might make offers of investment, trade incentives, and relief from sanctions plausible. For mevies events, Minsk could trade symbolic gestures for concrete gains: infrastructure funding, alternative energy supplies, technological cooperation, or conditional access to Western markets. Its unique selling point may be its ability to tilt without collapsing, to maintain enough alignment with Russia to avoid immediate reprisal while inching toward greater autonomy and connectivity with other regional actors. The cost of pursuing this path is serious. Financially, Belarus enjoys favorable energy rates, soft loans, trade privileges from Russia. If those are reduced or withdrawn, energy costs inside the country could rise sharply. Inflation and scarcity of imports could follow. Disruption in subsidized services or in trade flows could hit ordinary citizens hard. Politically, those with vested interest in the status quo, the elite cadres, military leadership, state-owned enterprises dependent on Russian supply chains, might resist, lobby, or act to slow reforms. Moscow could respond with economic coercion, tariffs on Belarusian exports, closures of supply routes, rerouting of trade, withdrawal of credit or investments. There is also risk of direct pressure. Troop presence near borders, military exercises aimed at intimidation, hybrid warfare tactics, influence operations to shape public opinion. The domestic population may face uncertainty. Disruptions of livelihood, energy shortages, or increased cost of living could cause unrest, requiring the regime to balance assertiveness with social stability. For Ukraine, neighboring states, and international observers, the implications are sizable. If Belarus begins to restrict transit of Russian military hardware, Ukrainian supply lines, and Moscow's invasion logistics may be meant to be disrupted. If Minsk provides new or enhanced humanitarian access, that could alleviate suffering in Ukraine or ease pressures on displaced populations. For the EU and NATO, Belarus's behavior is a barometer. Whether Moscow can count on Belarus to serve as rear support or not. For foreign trade and investment flows, changes in Belarus's status could affect regional supply chains, energy routes, and investment risk assessments. Neighboring countries may strengthen their border readiness, adjust diplomatic posture, or offer Belarus inducements to further loosen ties with Russia. International institutions may find new openings to engage Belarus in cooperative frameworks. If Minsk shows consistent behavior aligned with international norms, sovereignty, and non-use of its territory for aggression. If Belarus proceeds further, monitoring will reveal whether certain signals become hard policy. Key indicators will include whether Belarus formally restricts or bans transit of offensive Russian military equipment, whether Russian forces are withdrawn or denied use of certain bases or training grounds, whether diplomatic statements shift from rhetoric about alliance toward framing in terms of national sovereignty, whether alternative trade and energy agreements are signed, and whether internal civil protections are strengthened. Also important will be how Russia reacts, whether it imposes penalties, attempts coercion, or counteracts with displays of force. Equally, how Western actors respond, whether they provide credible incentives, uphold promises of investment or trade, or are satisfied with minimal gestures, will matter for Belarus's calculus. The decision Belarus is facing is not binary. It may not choose full alignment with Ukraine or the West, nor fully revert to being Russia's satellite. Rather, what appears more likely is a gradient of change. Symbolic gestures first, then administrative changes, then perhaps operational restrictions, with economic diversification gradually increasing. If all goes well, Belarus could emerge more independent, less vulnerable, and better positioned to negotiate in its own interest. If it miscalculates, it could find itself squeezed between Moscow's demands and Western expectations, with domestic instability or economic pain as the price. Recent weeks have already shown some of these small changes: trade route adjustments, delays or inspections at crossings, new language about sovereignty in official media, small shifts in supply sourcing, but each remains modest, and none yet rises to the level of clear policy overturn. The question remains whether Minsk will elevate these to durable structural changes. If it does, the warning to Russia will be more than rhetoric. It will be a turning point in Belarus's foreign policy and regional role. This unfolding story matters not only for Belarus and Ukraine, but for the entire region. It challenges assumptions about loyalty, control, and strategic dependency. Belarus's potential decision to favor Ukraine in some aspects may reshape supply chains, diplomatic alliances, security architecture, and perhaps influence outcomes in the wider war. The cost, the performance under pressure, the safety of citizens, and the unique leverage Belarus holds are all in play. The path ahead is uncertain, but what is happening now suggests Belarus is evaluating its options, testing limits, and possibly preparing for consequences. Observers should watch closely for what is done rather than what is said, for who moves resources, who signs agreements, and how both Moscow and Kyiv respond. The evolving situation could redefine the region's map of power. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe and like so you can follow these developments as they unfold.